If we go on peeling away the skins of improbability from the onion, we shall end eventually with a small kernel of historical fact on which to build some new theory about the historical Jesus, who he was, who his parents were, where he was really born and lived, how he spent his formative years, whether he was a well-meaning if somewhat ineffective political subversive, or just a religious reformer who annoyed the Roman and Jewish authorities and paid the price of nonconformity. It's all been done before, and there never seems to be a year that passes without the publication of some fresh, fanciful reconstruction of Jesus' life and death. That kind of speculative exercise may be commercially profitable, but it's of no real consequence. For the impact made by Christianity and the Church on 2,000 years of Western culture owes little to the comparatively trivial circumstances of its supposed founder's birth, life, and death, but much to the strangely compulsive nature of a faith that can turn sinners into saints and charming old men into born-again politicians, not entirely averse in the name of the Lord to blasting the rest of the world into a philosophic conformity. As for the contribution of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the discovery of Essene texts from the Qumran caves presents us with a rather similar dual perspective. We can for the first time clarify the Semitic background of some technical religious phraseology in the Greek Testament. We can appreciate hitherto unrecognized specific doctrinal teachings, allusions, trace the extra-canonical sources of some elements of Christian teaching, and match the manner and substance of certain kinds of biblical interpretation. In the sectarian rules of conduct, we can even see clear patterns for the organizational structure and discipline of the early Christian communities, like the institution of the presbytery and bishopric, disciplinary procedures, standards of communal behavior, methods of joint funding, attitudes to women and sex, the theological basis for the practice of spiritual healing, and so on. But to appreciate the main importance of the scrolls for an understanding of Christian origins, we need to raise our eyes to a much wider perspective. It's becoming possible to understand how an exclusive, nationalistic movement like post-exilic Judaism could combine with an alienistic, dualistic philosophy to produce a kind of Jewish Gnosticism, and then in due course, under the heat and pressures of certain socio-political events over the turn of the era, be transformed into the even more unlikely Hellenistic hybrid of a messianic mystery cult, a scandal to any decent-minded Jew, and sheer nonsense to an intelligent Greek. How then, on such a long view, can the scrolls help us to understand the person of Jesus of Nazareth? Well, not much, I think. Popular speculation centered on the person of the man Jesus and his relationship to the Essenes. Had he perhaps been a member of the Qumran community at some time? Had those 40 days in the wilderness been spent in the monastery by the Dead Sea? Were the parallels between some aspects of his teaching and Essene thought due to such direct contact? Or came they by way of that mysterious prophet of the wilderness, John the Baptist? Alas, the scrolls make no mention of the Nazarene teacher by name. Indeed, the whole gospel tradition of a wine-bibbing associate of whores, pimps, and quislings, a friend of Roman officers and an advocate of paying taxes to the enemy, has no parallel at all in what little we can glean from the scrolls about the manner of life of Jesus' Essene counterpart, the so-called Teacher of Righteousness. Where there are parallels in the scrolls to the Christian story, they are for the most part more likely to be in the nature of a common mythology. Even if there was a sectarian Jewish teacher living in Palestine during the first part of the 1st century called Joshua or Jesus, he had nothing at all to do with the crucified Christos of Paul's theology, thus had no part to play in the formation of that distinctive amalgam of faiths that eventually swept the world. I believe that the innocent collection of tales and sayings, which was apparently allowed to pass freely among the beleaguered cells of believers, in hourly danger of discovery and execution, was but a cover story. From that highly improbable account of a gentle rabbi, friend of little children, Roman tax collectors, and ladies with gynecological problems, could be distilled by skilled interpreters, well versed in the art of rabbinic exegesis as well as the abracadabra of Gnostic mysticism. Secret passwords and sayings, the formulae for medicaments and hallucinatory drugs, the therapia in practice and prescription, which had earned them their reputation and name of Essenes, physicians. Similarly, the inner councils of the church were aware of secret writings which were not to be promulgated even among the faithful. As the 2nd century church father Clement of Alexandria said in a letter recently recognized and published by Professor Morton Smith, not everything that is true needs necessarily to be divulged to all men. Once we can bring ourselves to admit that early Christianity, like Essenism, was an esoteric faith, offering access to the divine mysteries, and never the open evangelistic gospel of the church's defensive propaganda, we can begin more realistically to probe the depths of the New Testament writings and to set the faith in its proper historical and religious perspective. As far as the gospel narratives of Jesus are concerned, we can free ourselves forever from the need to lay bare a reality on which to base a more historically convincing portrait of a 1st century teacher who in 3 short years was supposed to have founded a new religion, or so transformed an existing messianic faith that it could become almost immediately acceptable to a Gentile world. We're dealing, Mr. Chairman, with myth, not history. And that was the faith that won the allegiance of the Western world. The Hebrew word used in these passages, yaka, in the Hifil, means properly dislocate, be torn away, and is variously translated in the ancient versions as impale, expose in the sun, make an example of, put to shame, or crucify. We can see a clear line of theological speculation which transformed an exclusive Jewish sectarianism into a Hellenistic mystery religion, which could attract the allegiance of all men, Jew or Gentile, bond or free. But the kind of Christianity we arrive at is that not of a faith, but to that Gnostic heresy whose essential individualism was so abhorred by the so-called Great Church, and which became the target of a persecution no less ruthless than that of the movement's first political and religious enemies. And to judge from the Church's subsequent history, as well as the illegitimacy of its claims to primacy, one can't help feeling that the wrong side won.